Amazon women rise. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. They say I do it, ain't nobody caught me. Sure gotta prove it on me. I'd like to get to know you in a special kind of womanly way. She was a big tough woman, the first to come along. Love of my life, I am crying, I am not dying, I am dancing. Something about the women, something about the women. There's something about the women in my life. Hi, I'm Jamie Anderson. Those songs were part of the soundtrack to my coming out as a lesbian and as a feminist. And maybe they were for you too. Even if they weren't, you might want to pick up my book, An Army of Lovers, Women's Music of the 70s and 80s. I have some stories from the book that I want to share with you, but before I do that, I want to tell you about the medley that I just did. I sang a line from Amazon by Maxine Feldman, and then I followed that up with Ella's song. It was written by Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan and performed by Sweet Honey in the Rock. Next was Provin' on Me Blues by Ma Rainey. She was one of our foremothers. She wrote and performed that song in the 20s. Later it was recorded by Teresa Trull for her first Olivia album. After that was Womanly Way by Linda Tillery. I followed that up with Gym Teacher by Meg Christian, Song of the Soul by Chris Williamson, and I ended it with Something About the Women, Holly Near. An Army of Lovers isn't a dry recitation of what happened when. It's a collection of great stories from the women who were there. I interviewed musicians, media people, sound technicians, DJs, producers, all kinds of women in women's music. And some of them had these incredible stories that I think really illustrate the strength and the power of women's music. One of my favorite stories is from Teresa Trull. In her interview, she told me about going to a women's music festival in 1974 in California. She lived in North Carolina, so it was kind of a hike. She was young, didn't have a lot of money, and she had a cast on her leg. She still wanted to go. So she and her girlfriend and some friends piled into a car and they drove to California. She played at the open mic. She got to meet Gwen Avery, which was very exciting for her. Some of you may know Gwen as the writer of Sugar Mama and other songs. And for some reason their ride wasn't available to go back home, so they decided to hitchhike home, her and her girlfriend. So they get as far as Nevada. Now in Nevada, hitchhiking is not legal. They saw a cop and they dove off the roadway, and Teresa broke her cast. They kept hitchhiking, but they only made it as far as Utah, and that's when they got on a bus and rode the rest of the way home. And I was telling that story to Pat, who goes by Pigar, who is one of the photographers who contributed to the book. And she said, I got something for you. And she sends me a link, and I click on it, and there is a photo of a young Teresa Trull sitting down with her guitar in front of her, microphones in front of her, and on her leg is a cast. I'm like, that has got to go in the book. So it's in the book. The year before that, in 1973, Kristen Lems and some friends of hers in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, were pretty angry that there was a local festival that featured only men. So they decided in 1973 to do their own festival with only female performers. It was small, but it was successful. And they thought, you know what, let's do it again next year. So they called it the National Women's Music Festival. They hired a promoter who promised them Roberta Flack, Yoko Ono, Janis Ian. So excitement was high. And in addition to those performers, they'd also booked Chris Williamson, Vicki Randall, the Clinch Mountain Backsteppers, which was Robin Flower, Mary Wings, and Woody Simmons. Kay Gardner was there. Really exciting. So the festival starts, and on the second day, the promoter disappeared with her salary, with her contacts. No Roberta Flack, no Yoko Ono, none of those big performers that she promised. And the organizers thought, you know what, we already have some terrific musicians here. So they booked all those musicians for Friday and Saturday night. And it was standing ovation after standing ovation. The energy was just incredible. Margie Adam was there, and she said that it was the first time that she heard Meg Christian, and she was so moved that she put her head in her hands and just sobbed. In 1975, Lisa Vogel, along with her sister Christy and some friends, went to the Boston Women's Music Festival. They enjoyed it, and they thought, you know, we should do something like this in Michigan. That's where they were living. So they went back, they started planning this festival. They hand drew a flyer, and then they took it to the National Women's Music Festival. And if you were at that festival and you took a stack of their flyers to distribute to your hometown, you got a cold beer. And at that festival was Deirdre McKellar, who remembers picking up a flyer and looking at it and going, oh, a women-only festival? That'll never fly. Now, mind you, women's music was really new then, so we really didn't know where it was going to go. Add to that, the National Women's Music Festival was at a university, and so women and men came to the show. Still, it was only women performers, so that's where that came from. And as it turns out, Deirdre performed at the Michigan Festival just a couple of years after that. And many of you know her Olivia albums that came later on. So the early part of this book is a timeline featuring these stories about the festivals with the performers, testimonials from fans, because fans didn't just say, oh, I like that song. They would say, that song saved my life. That's how women's music was for us. After that first part of the book, the first half, I have chapters that focus on one thing. I have one chapter that focuses on instrumentalists, women like Diane Lindsay, Joy Jolks, those women who play bass along with featured performers on stage and in the studio. I have a chapter about technicians, sign interpreters, media, all the other women in women's music, because this isn't just a book about the performers. I have a chapter called It's Just Folk Music, right? Because it wasn't. I have information about jazz, rock, classical. There was even a duo that did opera. I have a chapter about women's music outside the U.S., including Canada, where I live, Europe, Australia, and other places. I have one called The Goddess Needs Music, which is about spirituality and religion in women's music. And, I have a chapter called Trouble in Paradise, because we had some issues. Sometimes we figured it out, made things better. Sometimes we didn't figure it out. Sometimes it was just drugs, sex, and rock and roll. The last chapter is a brief overview of the 90s and beyond, and then I end with an extensive index. I hope you enjoy An Army of Lovers. I hope you buy it. I hope you encourage your friends to read it. I hope you encourage your libraries to order it. It's available from Bella Books. It'll be available at my performances and at my book events. Keep an eye out at jamieanderson.com and you'll find out where I am, and I hope to see you out there on the road. Meanwhile, Amazons, rise.